So in today's vlog, I thought I'd share something interesting that I get up to from time to time with you, and that is paragliding. So stick around for some hopefully kind of nice looking footage of flying around in the sky on a big piece of fabric. All right, so you're going to need to be a little bit patient to get to that footage of the paragliding, or you can just skip ahead to it, I suppose, because I am going to play some, they call it B-roll in the background, so some shots of my most recent trip out paragliding. And I'm going to start with some of what went on before the actual paragliding while I talk. Yeah, and I'm going to talk you through what went on that trip and maybe draw some connections through to Qigong or maybe to life in general as part of that. So in the background you can probably see here I'm walking along. The place where I went paragliding is a beach. It's called Parawaiting Beach, which is southwest of Auckland. Beautiful black sand beach with some lovely waves. And it's not actually too far from the car park that you can go paragliding, but you've got to walk along the beach a bit, and then you've got to go up quite a steep hill and then walk along the hills before you get to the launch site. And that's of course because you need the right conditions for there to be lift to keep you in the air. And so this type of paragliding that I did this day is called ridge soaring. And so you need to have a ridge, and you need to have the wind coming in from the right direction and at the right speed, so not too fast, not too slow, so that you've got the right strength, so that you're going to have nice lift to keep you flying along this ridge. So it's a bit of a walk to get there, and the forecast had been pretty good. So the wind forecast had been pretty good, that conditions, the angle would be pretty much perfect in the forecast, and the strength was going to be just about right as well. And so it looked like, you know, I might have a really good afternoon of paragliding out here along this ridge. So when I turned up, when I got to the launch site, to begin with there was just me, and then there was one other person who came up there, and the wind was just not quite strong enough. The angle was okay, not perfect, but okay, and it just wasn't really strong enough. And so we waited. Often what happens is in the afternoon, this is particularly on the coast, for coastal soaring, the sea breeze picks up later on in the afternoon, and so the wind gets a little bit stronger as you get later in the afternoon, and yeah, the conditions get better for flying. Of course, it can get too strong as well, and you don't want that because that would then become dangerous. But if you try to take off and go gliding when you don't have enough wind, enough lift, or the angle of the wind isn't quite right, well, you're going to have a very short flight. Again, either it'll be dangerous, so you don't want to do that, or if it's weak, you might have a flight, but it's going to be a pretty short one as you go off the hill, off the ridge, and just back down to the beach, and you know, and it is really quite a walk to get back up. So you don't want to do that too often. You tend to do that a lot when you're just beginning as a learner, because you don't really know what you're doing, and the idea is to just have some skill at launching and then landing. And so just practicing launching and then landing, that's all good as a beginner, and so you have to walk back up, that's okay. But once you've been paragliding for a while, you tend to avoid that if you possibly can, because you'd rather spend your time in the air rather than walking up steep hills. So we waited for a while, and you know, one of the things that I've found really interesting getting into some paragliding is it draws out some different aspects of observation of nature, things that you might not normally observe in quite the same way, because it doesn't affect you in quite the same way. But when you're paragliding, it really does. And so you really notice shifts in the wind for one, but as part of that, looking what's going on with the clouds and little subtle details of what's going on. And particularly on the coast, you're looking at what's coming in from out at sea. So you're looking at the surface of the water and what you can tell from that. And then these different patterns of what's going on with the clouds. And sometimes you'll have rain coming in. And you can see that in some of this footage where there's some squalls of rain, where it's basically just one or two clouds, but they have rain underneath them. And you want to watch out for those, because a couple of things happen. One, they do actually affect the wind, the strength and direction of the wind, so that's quite important. And also, it's not safe to paraglide in rain. Because it makes your wing, so that's the big piece of cloth that you fly under, much heavier once that's wet, and that affects the performance of the glider because it's designed to fly dry. And then in addition to that, when it's wet and much heavier than normal, it can also stretch and deform its shape, which also affects the performance of the glider and can make it dangerous. So in general, unless there's some extenuating circumstances, you don't want to be in the sky when it's raining. So yeah, and we had some squalls coming in, as you can see in the footage. And then after one of the squalls, the wind picked up a little bit, but then it dropped down again and the angle of the wind changed and it just wasn't really flyable yet. And then more people turned up. And so after a while, there were probably, it went from just me to two of us to probably about 10 or so people, all waiting. And so a few of those people who were waiting decided that while they were waiting, they'd try just getting their glider up into the air and putting it down again, and testing the wind out and just working with their glider. It's called ground handling, when you you get the glider into the air, you don't actually take off with it though. And so they were practicing getting it up and down, and that really just showed you the wind wasn't suitable. But then finally it picked up just a little bit more, and there were a couple of so we refer to paragliders, so the people who do paragliding, as pilots. That's officially what they're referred to, which sounds like a bit official and a bit serious. When you think about what we're doing, we basically have a big piece of cloth and we're launching off a cliff or a side of a hill or something, and we're just catching the currents of the wind. It's like, yeah, okay, I suppose that's a pilot of sorts. But I kind of think that wind monkey or something like that is a bit more accurate. So anyway, a couple of the pilots, or wind monkeys, decided that they were going to launch and try to have a flight, and they managed to fly, but they were only barely managing to stay above the ridgeline, and they were in quite high performance, quite high-end gliders. Which, so if in those high-end gliders, if they couldn't stay above the ridge, then someone else in another glider, again, like I said before, it would have been a short flight back down to the beach. And so they managed to fly for a little while, and then they managed to come back in and land without going down to the beach, so that was good for them. There were actually, one guy who, actually no, a couple of guys during that time who tried to launch, and they went down to the bottom. One of them walked back up. Another one decided that he was just heading home. So he was like, yep, that's me done. And off he went. So there was some marginal flying, but it was a real struggle. Struggle to fly at that stage. So we waited some more, and there was another big squall, so a big patch of rain cloud that came in, and so everyone packed the gear away and sheltered for that. And we waited some more, and eventually, for me, I had been waiting about 4.5 hours. For others, of course, they arrived after me, so they hadn't necessarily all waited as long as that. But for most people, it had been quite a wait. And by that stage, more people had arrived. There were like 20 or more people waiting. Eventually we could fly. So this is one of the partner sports that goes along with paragliding. It's affectionately known as Parawaiting. This is not an uncommon thing. To see the forecast, to see that, the forecast looks good, it looks like there's going to be a good chance you can fly. But then when you're actually out there, to need to wait and wait and hopefully eventually get to fly, but sometimes you don't even get to fly. If the conditions aren't there, you just can't launch. And so there's often a lot of waiting involved. Sometimes not. Sometimes you turn up and you're straight into it. But other times, you have to do a lot of para waiting. So anyway, eventually the conditions came right I wouldn't say they were amazing, but they were good enough that you could get out there and fly. And so, yeah, everyone decided they were going to fly. They'd been waiting, and off they went. And so that includes me. So this is where you're probably going to start to see some of the paragliding footage as I launched now. And yeah, I flew for about an hour. I probably could have kept going a bit longer, but again, I'd already been waiting out there for about 4.5 hours, and it's quite a drive from where I live to get out there. So about an hour was a pretty nice flight before I had to head home. And you can see in the footage, the skies were crowded. There were lots of paragliders because while, again, the conditions were okay for flying, but they weren't great. When the conditions are great, this particular stretch of coast, you can fly, it's about 30 kilometers, a bit more than 30 kilometers, I think, of ridge that you can fly right up and down the coast. And people will spread out and they'll just, go quite far away. But because the conditions were more marginal, everyone was staying probably within a kilometre of the launch site. Because if conditions change and you have to land, well, that is one heck of a walk back to your car if you've gone too far away. So yeah, crowded flying, but it was nice, and it was great that I got to do that. And partly because I hadn't been out in ages. I checked, and actually the previous time I'd been out was December. So it was like, almost 4 months, 3.5, 4 months since my last flight. So it had been a long time. So it was nice to finally get out there. Often just over this summer, because summer is the main season for paragliding. Over the summer I had, either when conditions were right, I had work and other stuff I had to do, or when I was available, conditions weren't right. It was raining or the wind wasn't the right strength or direction, and so I didn't get to do much flying. So it was great that I was able to get out for that reason. It was also pretty cool for a couple of other reasons. One being that this is probably going to be my last time paragliding in quite a while, for reasons that I will reveal in the next vlog. So there's a little hook for you to come back and watch the next one. And then the other reason being, I wanted to make this vlog about paragliding. It's something I've thought about doing for a while, because it is something that's interesting to look at, so make a maybe somewhat interesting video. But yeah, for a variety of reasons, I just hadn't been able to. Big one being that I hadn't been out flying at all myself. But even prior to that, I'd thought about doing it, but yeah, different reasons I hadn't managed to make a vlog. All right, so that's paragliding. Now, what are some maybe connections we can draw from this that might have something to do with the theme of this channel, Qi life, Qigong, working with energy? I think one of the big ones that really comes out where you're doing anything working with nature is the importance of working with the natural rhythms of nature. You can't really fight nature. You can do things to adapt to nature but in the end, nature is this powerful, powerful force, and it has rhythms, and we just have to fit in with them. And so this applies, well, particularly to paragliding. If the wind's not there, the wind's not there. If the wind's the wrong angle, it's the wrong angle. If the wind's too strong, it's too strong. There's nothing to do but to watch those rhythms and to pick the right moments, to work with nature, to harmonize with nature rather than trying to fight against it or just trying to push ahead with what you want to do regardless. You've got to take those natural rhythms into account. And again, this applies very much to anything else we do, really connecting to nature as well. And I think broadly, this does apply to every aspect of our life. And we sometimes don't realize it, but it's helpful for us to be more consciously aware of it, to recognize that there are rhythms and there's timing for things to occur. And sometimes we have a plan of specifically what we want to do, but if things aren't working the right way around us in nature, And part of nature is society, the people around us and things like that as well. That is actually part of nature. If those rhythms aren't working together, well, to try to push ahead and just force something to happen is, well, it's out of harmony, and it's not likely to lead to the results that really we want. And so, yeah, it's quite important for us to really harmonize with what's going on around us. And sometimes that means waiting. Sometimes that can mean there's something we really, really want to do, but we just have to wait. We have to wait for the right moment. And it can be disappointing sometimes when we miss some of those moments where you're like, oh, I could have, but now I've missed it. But then, yeah, it's up to us to harmonize, tune in, pay attention, and work with the rhythms around us in nature, in society, in our own lives, and so on. I think that's probably the main connection I'd like to make from the paragliding. There's others I could make as well, I'm sure. And maybe in the future, I'll make some more vlogs about paragliding and talk about some of the lessons for me, or little parallels that I see from my experience paragliding with other aspects of how energy works and how nature works in general. So I might do another one in the future. Again, it's probably going to be a little while because I'm probably not going to get a chance to go paragliding for a little while, and you'll find out about why that is in the next vlog. All right, so that's it for now. If you've liked the vlog, please like, comment, subscribe, share, all those good things, and I look forward to seeing you on another one soon.